So let's start with a question. If migrating from a lousy account structure to a better account structure is in some cases problematic, is that a problem you've encountered? And what does the problem look like when you've seen it? And what have you done about it?
So I'll share with you just a story. So while I was at Nationwide, this situation came up where we had a shared account that had, it was an engineering account. So it was all our cloud team. No real restrictions on IAM permissions. We had no tag enforcement. So while we did have a hierarchy in place, within the hierarchy, we had one shared account where we did a lot of our build, dev, test work, just specifically for our cloud team, right? And so as FinOps practitioners, we looked at the situation and we said, okay, we've got a problem within a problem, right? We do have this good account hierarchy in place for our business units, but within our infrastructure team, we've got this engineering account that we don't know what the hell these guys are doing. And so, when I thought about it, it's really, the solution becomes, what do we do? What do we consider is the best approach to this? Because we've got a lot of abandoned resources. We've got a lot of wasted spend. We've got no spend accountability. And so we took a go forward approach, right? So it was this, let's draw a line in the sand. And we gave our internal engineering team 6 months. And we said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create an account hierarchy for you. We're going to make one for our database team. We're going to make one for our platform team. We're going to make one for our engineering team, one for our data warehouse team. And we gave them 6 months and said, if you want your workloads to persist, you got 6 months to migrate your workloads from this shared engineering account that was bastardized into your own. Now you manage your account, right? So it was draw a line in the sand, give them the time to migrate the workloads over. Now, if you do that at scale, that's a bigger challenge, right? We did this within, it was 500 associates within one shared account with all these shared cloud engineering resources, right? So I think, and I'm really passionate about this because I really believe that this is the reason why most FinOps practitioners struggle, is because they've got a failed account hierarchy and they don't know how to get out of it. And there's not a real clear-cut, easy answer. For us, it was kind of the go forward approach. And you may absorb some bubble costs drawing that line in the sand, giving your teams time to migrate to their own account. And then now you've got, resources running in the old account, plus the new resources are standing up in their new account. So you've got that parallel implementation or transition, if you will, and you could absorb some bubble cost. But in the long run, I think that's the best way to kind of position yourself and get yourself out of trouble in that respect.
When you gave them their 6-month challenge to migrate their resources into the new structure, did you consult with them on what that new structure would look like, or did you think, okay, well, we sort of know what that structure is going to look like and we're going to tell them what it is? How did you do that?
We actually did both, right? So the first thing we did was we looked at spend and we tried to figure out where would this spend land if we were to break it out, right? And then what makes sense from that perspective. And by doing that, then you kind of create that model. And then it was, let's go approach them and say, hey, it looks like you guys are in the shared account. Our finance teams and our infrastructure teams feel like you would be better served having your own account to manage it, do your deployments, build your own workloads. And then we've got that traceability into that spend based on, for us, it was the internal team. So yeah, it was kind of a two-part approach, right? So first was look at the spend and figure out what makes sense, and then approach the teams and say, hey, this is what we found. Does this make sense to you?
And what was their reaction in general when you gave them this 6-month challenge? What did you get pushback on that?
No, not really. Not really, because for them, It was a pretty straightforward approach. And I found that people really like to have ownership of something, right? So
Right.
it's like, yeah, it's like a shared, a taxi ride versus drive my own car, right? It was one of those approaches. So you approach them and say, hey, we want to give you guys your own account. I know you've got resources running in account X. We want to give you account Y, give you 6 months, whatever it is, to transition this stuff over. Yeah. And when you give them that sense of ownership, I think that it helps kind of drive that desire and you get less pushback.
And now I'm guessing that for the most part, in order to move their resources to the new hierarchy, they would need to refactor a lot of the stuff they had, right? So that must have been a substantial extra workload for them on top of what they
So
had
you,
to do.
yeah, so you have to balance that, right? I mean, that's the key thing. Two key things is, one, take a look at the labor that it's going to take to migrate those workloads to the new account. Is it really worth it, right? I mean, that's an organizational kind of decision you got to make. And the other piece of it too is, what you'll find is that when you do these migrations, there's a lot of residual stuff that gets left behind, and people are just like, hey, I didn't need that. Let's get rid of it, right? So they only migrate the pieces that they absolutely need to go forward. And so you generate cost savings just by doing that exercise.
You know what? That's such a
Right? Because
big
people are lazy. People are lazy, Mike. I'm like, why am I going to migrate this? I don't need to migrate
I've got
this.
a great analogy though, because I just spent most of the last week helping my daughter and her husband move house. And so, it's classic, isn't it? You must have moved house. So you get all
Oh
this,
yeah.
you say, well, what do you want to do with this that's been in the garage for the last 5 years? Hey, we don't need that. We've never used it. It was in the garage 5 years ago. It's still in the garage. Get rid of it. So it's the
Get rid of
same
it.
sort of thing, isn't it?
It's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. Yeah. I did the same thing. I moved probably 2 years ago. The curb was full of trash. Just, oh yeah, I don't need this. I don't need this. It's same exact concept. And that's exactly what we found when we moved from a shared pool account into a dedicated owned account aligned to our infrastructure team. Yeah, they left everything behind. Like, all right, shut it off, and boom, right away you got that instant savings from the residual waste.
So if you were to go into now a new organization,
Mm.
uh,
Oh,
and
I know where you're going.
you would see, let's say, a similar situation to the one you had before, where you had maybe shared accounts or large accounts that containing the work for a lot of different teams. What would be the way you'd approach that? What would you be think? How would you be thinking of kicking that off?
I tried to get buy-in first. I would kind of a trick that I would use is partner with the security team, because if I can get security buy-in and I can get architecture buy-in, then that helps drive those conversations within your internal business, right? To say, okay, look, we're going to create these dedicated accounts now. We're going to build out this hierarchy. And now I've got reasons for security purposes that say, hey, you've got, these accounts. Now we've got, better segmentation of environment. We've got, secure blast radius because we're not in a shared account. So if something goes wrong, there's not a chance that it could impact other applications, resources, et cetera. So the first thing I would do is I would try to get alignment with architecture and security at the leadership levels to say, here's kind of the approach, do an assessment. Let's figure out, is the labor effort worth it? Which I know long run, you're going to find it. You're going to find it as also as cost savings, right? Because you're going to have that residual stuff left behind. So that's another selling point. But I would try to get alignment with those teams and then figure out, here's what this hierarchy would look like. Get the adoption first, and then try to use a drawing a line in the sand, go forward approach, whether that's 12 months, 24 months, but get that build out and says, okay, here's where I want to get us to in 2 years, and here's why I want to get us there, right? The financial security risk, those type of things.
And we've talked here about 6 months, a year, 2 years. Is that? Do you think that's a normal time scale in a decent sized organization? Is that
Yeah,
how long it's likely to take?
it just depends, really. It depends on the volume of accounts and the size of the organization. Obviously, smaller organizations can pivot. The problem you run into with the time frames is it can be done pretty efficiently. It can be done pretty quickly, but you've got project delivery work, right? You've got other competing priorities. It's like, okay, where does this fit in, right? And that's the real tricky part, because this is, while it's nice to have work, um, it's not always going to be a top priority. And actually, it's probably going to be one of the lower priority things when
Yeah.
you stop and think about it, right? Um, and really, I think one of the drivers, we talk about raising it up on the priorities, getting at that leadership's going to start asking questions about cost transparency. And they're going to say, hey, I want to see the cost for this product, and I want to see the cost for this department. And you're not going to be able to produce that because you don't have good tagging policies in place, and you've got the shared account with just a bunch of crap in it. And so you could say, hey, you could maybe leverage that, say, if we did have a good account hierarchy, I can get you that information. Help me drive this new account hierarchy, right? Help give from a leadership level, get that buy-in. That's kind of how I would, position it, if you will.
What about the governance side of this? So going back to your earlier case study where you had the engineering team all in one big bucket, and you wanted to separate them out. I'm guessing you would have put in place some governance measures to ensure that they didn't revert back to a massive account carrying a lot of different resources, but there was now some new pathways they needed to tread in order to launch new accounts, create new resources, and so on.
You just nailed it, Mike, right? So the FinOps team is an integral part of the account, not only the strategy, but the creation of every account. And I always say, every time an account gets created, there's work that we have to do, right? As a FinOps practitioner, you have to be an integral part of every account that gets created. And from a governance perspective, you need to put those policies in place that says, here's here's a criteria that needs to be satisfied for you to have an account, right? I need to know, all kinds of information, the business unit. I need to know the department. I need to know the environment. I need to know a cost center to capture the untagged spend. I need to know who the owner is, those type of things, right? So that every time, and we used to have this, I still have it nationwide, but every time a ticket comes in to create an account, it has to have that criteria. And then we get a chance to review it for appropriateness. If yes, good. If not, go back, get questions, flush things out, etc. We had one lady that she didn't even have an application or product, but she wanted an account, and she just managed a pool of developer resources. And we're like, well, what do you need this account for, right? You don't have anything. So it's like, you vet those things out, right? And governance is, oh man, it's critical. It is critical.
Do you think that's an area where the scope for automation?
Yeah, that's what I mean. We had all of our account creation process was all automated. I mean, we just took the criteria, took the inputs, and then, no, it wasn't CloudFormation or Terraform, but it was something similar to that, where they could actually had a standard process to create those things, and even all the way down to the naming taxonomy of the account itself. All those things aligned.
So some people might say, well, look, changing the account hierarchy, the account structure, that's really difficult, particularly given where we are and the need for refactoring a load of stuff to put them in a new hierarchy. It's really not worth it. Let's just do all of our cost allocation using tags. Let's tag everything, and then we don't need an account hierarchy. What would be your response to that?
That's great. I always say, in a shared account, if you can adopt a dedicated account hierarchy or dedicated account aligned accounts, you've really got to get heavy-handed and proactive in your tag enforcement. And you've got to do it at time of resource creation. You've got to do a validation check. And you've got to do that for damn near every service it's available for. can't do it reactively, which you could do in a dedicated account, because at the end of the day, if it's a dedicated account, you're going to know who's ultimately going to be responsible for that bill, right? But in these shared accounts, you've got to get heavy-handed. You got to do it automated. You got to do it tag validation at the time of resource creation, and then you got level set expectations, right? Because you're not going to tag everything. It's not possible. So I think, you know, figuring out what your KPI is to get, you know, a certain level of tag spend that you want to get to, and then level set some of those things with leadership. You know, I think that stuff's really critical. But get heavy-handed, invest if you're going to run a shared account. And we had some, if there's critical things you need to know, kill the resource at the time of creation. We had to do that. People had to go look at CloudTrail logs to see why the resource was stopped and why it wouldn't start. And you didn't give us the information you need. Sorry. And if you have and then organizations, a lot of organizations have just way too many damn tags, right? So if you're doing this proactive stuff, it's going to take you longer for your developers to go out and figure out all these different tags they have to supply that are required than it will be to stand up the damn resource itself. So, you know, I always push best practice. Like, let's figure out, you know, what we really want to know, what's really required, and only require those things.
Brilliant. Dusty, that's great. Thank you for starting your day with a call to the UK. And let's hope the European golf team can do a little bit better next time around.
Well, I don't know that they could do much worse.
Yeah. Fire them all.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. You have a great day. I'll probably.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.